There is a number that should be making more headlines than it is: 1 million. That is the number of young people in the United Kingdom between the ages of 16 and 24 who are currently not in employment, education, or training. The official term for this group is NEET. The unofficial term, used increasingly by economists, policymakers, and the researchers who have spent the last year studying the problem, is the lost generation. A government-commissioned review published in 2025 described what is happening to young people in the UK labour market as a perfect storm. And when you look at the specific forces converging simultaneously, that description is difficult to argue with. This video is about what those forces are, why the UK's youth unemployment problem is, by some measures, significantly worse than comparable economies, and why the decisions being made right now will determine whether this generation recovers or doesn't. The youth unemployment crisis in the UK is not the product of a single cause. It is the product of several forces arriving at the same time, and that convergence is what makes it particularly difficult to address. The first is the cost of employment itself. From April 2025, employer national insurance contributions rose from 13.8% to 15%, while the threshold at which those contributions kick in fell significantly, from £9,100 to £5,000 per employee. At the same time, the national living wage increased substantially. For large employers, these changes are manageable. For small and medium-sized businesses, the hospitality venues, the small retailers, the local services, they represent a significant increase in the cost of every hire. The predictable consequence has already shown up in the data. Hotels, pubs, and restaurants have been the hardest hit sector in every region of the UK, and the drop in employee jobs among younger workers is particularly worrying for policymakers. Hospitality vacancies have nearly halved over the past 4 years. These were entry-level roles, the first jobs that gave young people their first payslip, their first reference, their first foothold in the world of work. They are disappearing precisely as a generation of young people needs them most. The Workers' Rights Bill adds another layer of complexity. Legislation that makes it harder and more costly to let people go makes employers more cautious about taking people on in the first place. The people who pay the price for that caution are the ones at the back of the queue, and in a labour market where employers can choose between experienced candidates and inexperienced ones, young people with no track record are consistently at the back of the queue. Beyond the immediate policy changes, there are structural dynamics that have been building for longer and are harder to reverse quickly. The first is the retirement age. As the state pension age rises and older workers stay in employment longer, the jobs that would previously have become available as experienced workers retired are staying filled. Young people entering the labour market are competing not just with their own age group, but with a workforce that is staying in place for longer. The experienced candidate who would once have retired is still there, and employers with a choice between experience and potential consistently choose experience. The second is AI screening. The application process for most professional roles now passes through automated screening systems before any human sees a CV. These systems filter on keywords, on experience, on qualifications that map to existing role templates. The young person with potential but limited track record, exactly the candidate an entry-level role is supposed to develop, is filtered out before they get a chance to make their case. A technology designed to improve hiring efficiency is, as a side effect, systematically disadvantaging people who have not yet had the opportunity to accumulate the signals the algorithm is looking for. The third is the benefit structure. For young people on universal credit, the financial difference between being in low-paid work and remaining on benefits can be relatively small, particularly once travel costs, childcare, and the loss of passported benefits are factored in. This is not a character failing. It is a rational response to the incentive structure, but it means that the system designed to support young people while they find work can, in practice, reduce the urgency of finding it. One of the most striking findings from the 2025 government review was the international comparison. The review found that the UK's youth inactivity problem is not simply a reflection of post-pandemic recovery challenges that all countries are navigating. It is, by multiple measures, significantly worse than comparable economies. The proportion of young people out of work, training, or education in the UK is approximately 3 times higher than in the Netherlands and twice as high as in Ireland. That gap is not explained by demographics or by the economic cycle. It reflects something structural about how the UK labour market is functioning for young people and how the specific combination of employer cost increases, benefit structures, and the collapse of entry-level opportunities in sectors like hospitality has created conditions that other comparable economies have not produced to the same degree. The economic cost of this is not abstract. The review estimated that 1 million young people not in employment, education, or training costs the UK economy approximately £125 billion annually in lost productivity, benefit expenditure, and long-term health and social costs. That is not a rounding error. It is a structural drag on the economy that compounds with every year the problem persists. The review that produced these findings was commissioned because the scale of the problem had become impossible to ignore. The term lost generation is not hyperbole. Research consistently shows that young people who spend extended periods outside employment, education, or training in their early years face lasting consequences: lower lifetime earnings, poorer health outcomes, and a reduced probability of ever achieving stable employment. The policy challenge is genuine. Reducing employer costs to encourage hiring costs, money the government does not have. Reforming the benefit structure to make work pay more consistently requires political will and careful design. Addressing the structural barriers, the AI screening tools, the retirement age dynamics, the collapse of entry-level sectors, requires coordination across multiple policy areas simultaneously. What is clear is that the current trajectory is not sustainable. A generation that cannot get its first job does not simply recover when conditions improve. The longer the period outside work, the harder re-entry becomes. The window for intervention is not unlimited. Britain has 1 million young people standing at a door that is not opening. What happens next depends entirely on whether the people with the keys decide to use them. At Macro Breakdown, we break down the economic forces shaping the world, from the events that defined history to the shifts happening right now. If this video gave you something to think about, subscribe, and we will keep covering the stories that matter. Drop any questions in the comments below.